Hi, my name is Lily. I'm 28 years old, and I never really thought of myself as the kind of person who would be caught up in emotional turmoil. Life's been pretty steady until it wasn't. I guess that's the thing about life, it has a way of throwing unexpected challenges your way when you least expect it. One minute, everything is fine, and the next, you're standing there, watching everything slip through your fingers. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I want to tell you my story because, well, maybe it'll help you understand that we all make mistakes, sometimes huge ones, and that's okay. We all have our flaws, and sometimes, we hurt the ones we care about the most, without even realizing it. I've been in a relationship with Jack for almost 2 years now. 2 years isn't a lifetime, but it's long enough to think you know a person. Or, at least, I thought I did. We met at work, and it was like something out of a movie. Instant connection. He was charming, funny, and just the right balance of easygoing and thoughtful. I thought, this is it. This is the one. And for a while, it felt like that. But here's the thing no one tells you about relationships, even when everything seems perfect, there's always something underneath, something that you don't notice until it suddenly rears its ugly head. For Jack and me, that something was communication. We never really talked about our feelings, not in the way that we should have. Sure, we had the usual conversations about our day, our plans, and even our hopes for the future, but when it came to the hard stuff, the things that hurt, the things that made us doubt ourselves, we didn't talk about those things. I was so used to keeping everything inside. I thought it was easier that way. Now, I can't help but wonder if that's what led to everything spiraling out of control. I remember that day so clearly, even though it feels like a blur now. It was a Saturday afternoon, and we were sitting on the couch, watching TV. You know, just one of those lazy days where nothing particularly exciting happens. I don't even remember what we were arguing about, to be honest. Maybe it was something small, like him leaving his dirty dishes around the house again or me nagging about how he never helped out with the laundry. It doesn't even matter. The point is, we were arguing, and I was frustrated. And then I said it. I didn't even think about it at the time. It just slipped out, like one of those things you wish you could take back the second they leave your mouth. I compared him to my ex-boyfriend. I know, stupid, right? But in that moment, I was so angry, so hurt by the little things that had been building up, and it just came out. I said, "You're just like my ex. Always so cold when I need you most." The words hung in the air, and I immediately regretted them. But it was too late. Jack's face changed. It was like I had thrown a bucket of ice water on him. His eyes, those eyes that used to look at me with love, went cold. The warmth in his expression faded, and I saw something in him that I hadn't seen before. Something distant, something final. And that was the moment everything shifted. The moment I said those words, everything changed. It was like I had lit a match and thrown it into a room full of gasoline. I had no idea that something so small, so insignificant in the grand scheme of things, could trigger such a massive reaction. But Jack's silence after I made that comparison was deafening. It wasn't just the words I had said, it was the way he looked at me, the way he pulled away. At first, there was this awkward stillness between us. The kind of silence that's too thick to be comfortable. I felt my heart start to race, and the realization of what I had just done hit me like a ton of bricks. I tried to backtrack, to take it all back, but it was as if the words had already etched themselves into the air around us, impossible to erase. I opened my mouth, wanting to say I didn't mean it, that I was just upset, that I was only venting, but nothing came out. My throat felt tight, and my words became tangled in the mess I had made. Jack didn't respond immediately, which only made things worse. It felt like every second stretched out, longer and longer, as I waited for him to say something. Anything. But he didn't. He just stood there, his eyes fixed on the ground, looking like he was trying to hold something in. I could see the tension in his jaw, the way his fists clenched by his sides. And then, after what seemed like an eternity, he finally spoke. "You really think I'm like him?" Jack's voice was calm, eerily so. There was no anger in it, no shouting. It was just a quiet, controlled hurt. "You honestly think I'm just another version of your ex?" The way he said it made my chest tighten. It was as though he had already made up his mind, like the comparison I had made was the final nail in the coffin. His words cut deeper than anything I could have imagined. It wasn't just about the fight, it was about him feeling like he was nothing more than a shadow of someone I had once loved. And that was something I never intended to make him feel. "I didn't mean it like that," I whispered, but my voice faltered as I spoke, realizing how weak my apology sounded. "I was just frustrated, Jack. You know I didn't mean to," but he shook his head, and that's when it hit me, he wasn't going to forgive me that easily. His expression hardened, his eyes now filled with something I couldn't read. Anger? Disappointment? Maybe both. He turned to walk away, and for a brief second, I thought he might leave. But he didn't. He went to the door, grabbed his jacket, and paused. "You know what, Lily? I can't do this anymore. I can't keep feeling like I'm competing with your past. If that's how you see me, then I think it's time we take a break." My breath caught in my throat. I froze, not knowing how to respond. He didn't raise his voice, didn't shout. He didn't need to. His words were final. It was like someone had just slammed the door shut on everything we had built. Jack didn't even wait for me to say anything else. He grabbed his keys, and before I knew it, he was gone. Just like that. I sat there in the silence, trying to process what had just happened. I couldn't believe it. I had said something stupid, something I never should have, and now it felt like I had lost him for good. There was no shouting, no argument. He had just walked away, gone without a second glance. And in that moment, I realized just how much I had messed up. I spent the next few hours sitting on the couch, in a state of complete disbelief. The silence of the apartment was suffocating, and the weight of what had just happened pressed down on me like a heavy blanket. I kept replaying the argument over and over in my mind, trying to find the exact moment when everything went wrong. I had made a stupid mistake, and now Jack was gone. Gone because of my careless words. But no matter how many times I tried to rewind and fix it, the situation remained the same. I had hurt him. I had compared him to my ex. I had made him feel like he was nothing more than a replacement, and that was something I couldn't undo. In the stillness of the apartment, I felt the full extent of my mistake. I wasn't just upset about the fight anymore, I was devastated by the realization that I had damaged something I cared about deeply. I tried to call him, of course. I dialed his number over and over, but it went straight to voicemail each time. I left messages, telling him how sorry I was, how much I regretted what I had said, and that I wanted to fix things. But deep down, I knew that I couldn't just undo the hurt I had caused with a simple apology. I had pushed him to his breaking point, and I wasn't sure if I could come back from that. The hours stretched on, and I couldn't seem to shake the overwhelming sense of guilt that was consuming me. I wandered around the apartment, aimlessly moving from one room to another, trying to distract myself from the knot of anxiety in my stomach. I made a cup of tea, but it tasted bitter. I tried to watch TV, but nothing could hold my attention. All I could think about was Jack, the way he had looked at me when I made that comparison, the hurt in his eyes, the way he had walked out without a second thought. It was then that I started to realize something important. I had been so focused on my own frustrations, my own feelings of anger and disappointment, that I hadn't really stopped to think about Jack's perspective. He had been hurt too. He had been trying, in his own way, to be the person I needed him to be, and I had dismissed that. I had made him feel like he wasn't enough. Worse, I had shown him that my past, my ex, still held power over me. And that was something I had never intended. The more I thought about it, the more I understood how unfair I had been to him. Jack had always been supportive, kind, and patient with me. He didn't deserve to be compared to someone who had hurt me in the past. He deserved better. And I had to find a way to make it right, even if it seemed impossible. But how? How could I fix something this broken? I felt lost. My mind was a jumble of conflicting emotions, guilt, regret, sadness, and, most of all, fear. Fear that I had lost him for good. Fear that no matter how hard I tried to make amends, it wouldn't matter. Fear that the damage had already been done. I knew I couldn't just sit here and wallow in self-pity. I needed to take responsibility for my actions. I needed to show Jack that I was truly sorry, that I recognized my mistake and was willing to do whatever it took to earn back his trust. But the question was, would he even give me that chance? Or had I pushed him too far? It had been 2 days since Jack walked out. 2 long days that felt like an eternity. I hadn't heard from him, not even a single text or call. It was almost as if he had disappeared from my life completely. I couldn't blame him for needing space. I had hurt him in a way I never thought I was capable of. I had turned a moment of frustration into a painful, irreversible rift between us. And now, all I could do was wait. But waiting was agonizing. I knew I needed to take action. I couldn't just let this be the end. I wasn't the kind of person to give up easily, especially not on something I valued as much as my relationship with Jack. I had to prove to him that I was capable of growth, that I was willing to change, and that I deeply regretted the hurt I had caused. But where do you even start when you've made such a mess of things? I spent the next day thinking about the best way to reach out to him. I wanted to be sincere, to show him that I wasn't just apologizing to fix things, but that I had learned from my mistake and wanted to be better. I knew a simple text or a phone call wouldn't cut it. I needed something more, a gesture that would show him how much I was willing to fight for us. That's when the idea hit me. I remembered how much Jack loved that little cafe by the lake where we used to go when we first started dating. We hadn't gone there in months, life had gotten busy, and I hadn't thought to make time for the small moments that mattered. But now, I saw it as the perfect place to try and reconnect, to show him that I wanted to rebuild what we had lost. The plan was simple. I would go to the cafe, just like we used to, and I would wait. I would give him the space to come to me on his own terms, but I would also show him that I wasn't giving up. I needed him to see that I was committed to making things right, that I was ready to listen and learn from my mistakes. Maybe, just maybe, he would see how much I cared. The morning of the planned meetup, I felt a mix of hope and fear. What if he didn't come? What if my apology wasn't enough? What if he had already moved on and decided that he didn't want to be with me anymore? But I couldn't let fear hold me back. I had to take that first step. I arrived at the cafe early. I found a quiet table by the window, just like the one we always sat at. I ordered a coffee, but I barely touched it. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was riding on this moment. I checked my phone, hoping for a message from Jack, but there was nothing. I glanced out the window, the sunlight glistening off the surface of the lake, and for a brief moment, I wondered if he would actually show up. Maybe I was just fooling myself, holding on to something that was already gone. But then, as the door opened, I saw him. Jack, standing there in the doorway, looking hesitant but not yet walking away. He looked different. His expression was softer, more thoughtful, like he was still processing everything that had happened. But when he saw me, he didn't turn and walk out. Instead, he walked toward me slowly, and my heart leaped in my chest. He sat down without a word, and for a moment, we just sat there in silence. I knew this wasn't going to be easy. But this was the moment. This was where I could show him that I wasn't the person who had hurt him, at least not anymore. The question now was, could we rebuild what we had lost? The silence between us was thick, almost unbearable. Jack sat across from me, his eyes scanning the table, his fingers fidgeting with the edge of his coffee cup. I could tell he wasn't angry anymore, but there was something else, something more complicated, something that felt like a mix of caution and uncertainty. I knew I couldn't just sit there, waiting for him to make the first move. I had to speak. I had to tell him everything that had been weighing on my heart since the day he left. "Jack," I began, my voice trembling slightly, "I'm sorry. I know I can't just take back what I said, but I need you to know that I didn't mean it. I didn't mean to make you feel like you were nothing compared to my past. You're not. You're so much more than that. I was just frustrated and I took it out on you. And for that, I'm deeply sorry." Jack didn't say anything right away, and my heart dropped. I felt like I had laid my soul bare, and now all I could do was wait, hoping that my words reached him, hoping that he would understand. But instead of speaking, he looked out the window, his brow furrowed, like he was weighing my words. It was agonizing, sitting there in the quiet while I waited for him to process everything I had just said. For a long moment, I thought he might just get up and walk away again. I couldn't blame him. I had messed up. I had made him feel like he wasn't enough. And what if, no matter how hard I tried to fix it, I couldn't make it right? The fear of losing him forever crept into my chest, threatening to suffocate me. But then, Jack finally spoke. His voice was low, but it carried a weight that I hadn't expected. "I know you didn't mean it. But it still hurt. You compared me to someone who hurt you, someone who wasn't there for you. And I've always tried to be there for you. I don't want to be your ex. I don't want to be someone you're just settling for." The honesty in his words stung, but it also opened something up inside of me. He wasn't just angry at me for the comparison, he was hurt by it. He was hurt because I had questioned his place in my life, and that was something I hadn't fully understood until now. I had treated him like he was just another man in my past, instead of seeing him for who he truly was, someone who loved me, who supported me, and who deserved my trust and respect. "I never wanted to make you feel like that," I whispered, my voice shaking. "You mean everything to me, Jack. And I don't want to lose you over something so stupid." There was a long pause, and I thought for a moment that he might say something, anything. But instead, he took a deep breath, and when he looked at me, his expression had softened. His eyes weren't filled with anger or disappointment anymore. There was something more vulnerable in them now, something that made my heart ache with relief. "You're right," he said quietly, his voice full of emotion. "We've both messed up. But we can't just keep living in the past. We have to move forward. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but I'm willing to try if you are." I could hardly believe my ears. My heart skipped a beat and a wave of warmth flooded through me. I had feared that the damage I had caused was too much to repair, but Jack was willing to try again. He was willing to give us another chance. And in that moment, I realized just how much we had both grown from this experience. We weren't perfect, and we had a long way to go, but we were willing to work through it together. "Thank you," I whispered, my eyes brimming with tears. "I won't take this for granted. I promise." As we sat there, the weight of the past few days finally began to lift. We didn't have all the answers, but we had each other. And that was enough for now. In the end, the resolution wasn't just about forgiveness, it was about growth, understanding, and the willingness to move forward, even after everything had fallen apart. Together, we could rebuild. And this time, I would make sure to never forget the value of what we had.